All right. Well, welcome everyone to our AI Appetizers Lunch and Learn series, a taste of ethical AI for educators. This is our second week in this series, and this week we're going to be talking about AI transparency and teacher guidance. And excited to see many of you throwing in the chat your name and where you're from and what you do. That just allows us to collaborate a little bit more as we get going. The link to today's presentation will be in the Padlet that is shared out at the end, but you'll see it here. It's that bit.ly/AI transparency, all lowercase. And we're going to talk about some great smart choices that you can make as an educator and leader in your districts to start discussing what does AI transparency actually look like, and how do you support your teachers and students when we start integrating AI into our everyday activities. So I'm going to kick us off with a question again. And I know Zoom is always tricky to get people to talk. So of course, I do encourage you to unmute to this question if you want to share. But if you are more comfortable or not able to talk where you are, please drop your experiences in the chat. So our opening question today stems off of our last week's segment where we talked about student engagement. And we offered some suggestions of ways and activities and resources you could use to start implementing AI with your students. So my question to you today is, how have you used AI, either in your role if you don't have students, or if you are a teacher, how have you used AI with your students? So feel free to unmute or go ahead and drop those experiences in the chat, and I'll give you just a moment.
I can talk. My name's Angie. I'm from Norton, and I'm a tech coordinator for the district, and I have regular meetings with my tech advisory committee, and we just happened to be meeting after we had the last session. And I shared with them the example of the two lies and one truth. So I had a variety of teachers to share that, and what a quick little fun way to integrate AI in any grade level. I told them how I saved basically the prompt in a Google Doc so I could just copy and paste it in and just adjust my grade level, my topic. And what I also most appreciate from that as a tech coordinator is that you didn't need to sign into the site. So I don't have to worry about student data privacy so much unless I was putting something in that might be inappropriate. So that's my little blurb.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angie, for being willing to share that, and glad that it was a helpful resource to you too. Anyone else want to take a moment to share how they've used AI either for themselves or with their students? Okay, looks like we have Gina in the chat, says that as a teacher, she's made a video guide for Shakespeare video for a day that you were going to be gone from class. Oh, that's pretty cool. Gina, what was the website or tool that you used to create that video? I'm just very curious. Diffit. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. There are just so many great resources out there. I feel like there you can find things that, of course, that don't require student logins, which does make it very easy for that. So it's super awesome. Betsy, great. She shared in the chat. Been doing AI training with staff. We started with a focus on time saving for teachers, staff, and intervention specialists. Just now moving into using it with students. Yes, awesome. It's great to see the aha moments with teachers. They love that AI can give them more time with the important parts of instruction. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that, Betsy. And I feel we're all in that learning stage right now where it's okay to learn along with our students, along with our teachers and our peers and co-teachers, because we're finding new things every day, and AI tools are getting better at what they do every day. I think every time I log on to something, I'm like, oh, they've changed that, or now there's an update, or now you can do this. And I have a feeling that it's going to continue to get better as we work through. If you have other things to share, please keep throwing those into the chat. and read those, but I'm going to keep rolling this morning so that way we can really dive into what we wanted to discuss today. And that, what is AI transparency? So when we think about transparency, we always think of, it's letting people know that we're using these tools, but it's a little bit more than that when we talk about AI transparency. So what model is the AI tool actually using? So when we talk about DFIT or Magic School or any of those, what is the platform that they're using? Are they using Claude's Anthropic? Are they using the Open AI tool and large language model? There's lots of different things out there. We also have to talk about what are those age restrictions, and we kind of touched on those a little bit last week. But it's more than that. It's that decision making, making it visible to educators and students. And then the biggest part is making sure that it's used ethically, responsibly, and it's supporting our students so that way they are still using their human element, which is their critical thinking and problem solving skills. So how are we going to help our teachers and our students really talk about what AI transparency is? So when I say AI transparency for all, this list of 4 things is for educators and students. For everyone, basically, this could be included. So the first step in that AI transparency is making sure that our students, as well as ourselves, understand how AI works. I was just at a session last week and had adults asking me, saying, hey, how does it pull all this information together and create the words that are there? So I gave you a couple tools, and every time we do a session, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, there's so many things in here. So I have linked in here the how. So this is a great video, and I'm not going to play all the way through it, but it comes from Common Sense Media, and it's in a video I've used with both teachers and students, and it talks about what is AI. So it talks about how it is machine learning, how it's learning from big data, and all the information that's on the internet. Another tool that I like to demonstrate, especially to adults and students, is Google's Quick Draw. So I'm going to jump over here. And if you go to the Get the Data portion on Google Quick Draw, you'll see that here's all the pictures that it asks people to draw. So if I were to go click on this baseball, this gives me some sense of that there's 126,439 baseball drawings that have been built into this data set. So whenever you play this game and someone starts drawing a circle, how does Google Quick Draw analyze that and decide and guess that, hey, you're drawing a baseball? Well, it's based off of all of these data points. People don't realize that everything they're doing on the internet sometimes is being collected into this. So this was a great thing to kind of demonstrate to kids, and then they could actually hover over each of these and see how that person went through the process in their mind to draw this out. So 2 great things to start just very easily with understanding how AI works. Then we have to talk about when we're using AI. So not only when students are using AI for their work in the classroom, but teachers even discussing and disclosing when they're using AI to either help create a lesson, to use it for feedback, especially for feedback. So that way students realize like, hey, AI is a tool and it's not replacing my teacher. It's not replacing the work that I'm doing, but it's something that I can use to support me. So we definitely need to have that openness in those conversations to disclose that, hey, I'm using this right now. It's okay for us as adults to tell our students that we also use these tools. The third one is that data privacy, and Angie already kind of talked about that a little bit. So this link here will take you out to the Student Data Privacy Consortium. And here we go. Good. It's still logged in. So there is one, especially for Ohio and so many school districts, especially if you're a tech director right now or anyone involved in tech in your districts, you are probably working on all of those DPAs that have to be signed. And that's part of that SB 29 piece. This is a great place where I go because so many districts are approving different things. Well, if you want to make sure you know what is allowed in your district or not, you can search by your district name here in this link, and you'll be able to see so far what are the tools that they have approved on the way. So I would definitely start there if I were in the classroom and making sure that what I'm doing with my students is something approved by my district. The last piece is for everyone. we have to constantly evaluate, fact check, and analyze the AI results. So, some great tools in order to do that. I'm going to give you some that you can use starting with your students, no matter what grade. But one of the tools I even really like to use is Perplexity. And Perplexity is an AI tool very similar to ChatGPT and Claude. It requires the users to be 13 and up. But what's really neat about Perplexity is after you prompt it, whatever question, you're going to see underneath here that it has given me these resources plus 5 more where it has pulled from those data points in order to create the answer. So if I were modeling this with my students, I could come in here and say, okay, is this answer correct? Are they making up the information? Because we know AI can hallucinate. So they can go into these exact resources that were pulled from Perplexity, and they can go in and say, okay, yeah, this is a reputable resource. Okay, it comes from an education institution or wherever it may be coming from, and they can pull out that information. You'll also see here in the results, it puts those resources embedded in the answer. So I have these numbers here I'm clicking on. If I click on it, it will take me directly out to that website. So that way I can say, hey, is this information real or not? That is a huge piece because I think that's the piece kids are missing right now is they just think it's magic. They put something into it, and even maybe adults too, that they get information back from it, but don't realize that, yeah, it can totally make up names to books. It can make up facts that aren't true. It can solve math problems incorrectly. So being able to do something like this with your students together on your interactive board or on your projector screen, whatever that looks like, is a great starting point when we really dive into AI transparency. So why is this so important, right? So this piece right here, thinking it's magic. Kids so many times just, oh, it's going to do my work for me. They copy and paste it. And then we have this cycle of teachers saying they're cheating using the AI. So what are we going to do with this? And then we have conversations of, well, what conversations have you had with them? Have you modeled for them how to do that? So we want to prevent students and adults from over relying on AI and remembering that we still need that human component in there. We have to be able to critically analyze what is real and what's not, and then also make it our own when we talk about creativity pieces. This piece right here is huge. And this is no different. If you're an educator in the classroom and have been in education, building trust with your students, your administrators, your parents, whatever that looks like is huge. When students know they can trust you, they're more likely to come to you and say, you know what, I was thinking about AI on this, using AI on this. What are your thoughts? Well, that's going to lead us into our next piece. So we need to build that trust so there's a comfortableness for students and educators to have those conversations. And then this last piece, encourage ethical AI use. So we know that with technology over the years, people always use it for bad, and then there's the people that use it for good. So how can we model for our students the ethical and appropriate ways that they can use AI as a resource, not to do their thinking for them, but also prepare them for what is their future going to look like? Because careers are changing the way that they are running and using these things based on how AI is rapidly evolving and changing. So here's another fantastic resource. So all those things we're kind of keeping in mind as we get ready to do this with our students. We've kind of done some games last week. We get them engaged and excited, but this week we're really diving into, what does this look like? Here's another great resource from Common Sense Media. And I thought this was fantastic for the teachers that ask me all the time, hey, what age do kids have to be to use this? Or even to share this with parents would be fantastic. So let me click on this. And I'm actually going to dive into here Perplexity because I demoed that for you. So I'm going to jump over here and see if I can do this. There we go. So if I click on Perplexity, zoom in a little bit so you can see, it's going to give me a breakdown. And if you've never been to Common Sense Media before, it is fantastic for giving you information about movies, video games, all the things that your kids are interacting with, apps, all of those. But it's going to tell me what Perplexity is. But then remember, we talked about where does it get its information from? So here it's telling me Perplexity doesn't have its own large language model. It's using multiple large language models, such as OpenAI and Anthropic. Now, for students, depending on their age, especially, they might not understand all of that, but you can let them know it's the big data, it's the internet. All the information that's out there on the internet, of course, is being compiled into these large data sets. And that's what is being used to create the large language that it's putting together where it's best. So this kind of breaks it down. And these again are kind of things I know I've heard people tell me that, Claude is better at math than ChatGPT, but then I see ChatGPT has evolved tremendously. So again, you can't always go with that because things are so rapidly changing, but at least it gives parents and teachers a starting point as well as students. So I think it's really important to even go to this last part, limits to use. This was that piece I was talking about. So here it's going to tell me Perplexity's terms don't allow users under the age of 13. So I definitely know that's there. Of course, you probably want to really default to what your district's student data privacy is. What does your acceptable use policy say? All of those things that may be in the background that we always don't think about when we're teaching every day in the classroom. So check out this site here. I would definitely model it with kids because I don't think they always realize the age restrictions on things and what something may have as a benefit and what things may have limitations to it. So it might be good to have them even evaluate which one they think is the best AI tool to use. And then after you kind of intro that, you can start to have this conversation. Now, if you haven't had a conversation like this, and either you're in the classroom or you're a tech leader or administrator in your district, I think this is something very necessary to be talking about with not just your teachers, not just your board, not just your parents, but you need to involve kids in these conversations as well. And this is where we're setting clear expectations. So I think about when I go back to when I was in the classroom and you get all excited, you start the new school year, but you always started off the new school year with, some fun things and involving kids and what our expectations were in the classroom. Okay, well, we got to turn our work in on time. We're going to work collaboratively together. We're going to say nice things to each other, whatever that looks like on your gamut of what grade you're teaching. But you can do this with co-creating an AI policy. You don't have to call it a policy. Some people call it AI guardrails, when to use, when not to use AI thing. But this could look like this. So you totally could run this however you want. But again, I wanted to share with you a resource that was very beneficial. And so this comes from AI for Education. And jump out here and I can jump over to it. Okay, so here it's going to show them that you could use this as a teacher and you could do it younger than even grades 7 to 9. I would probably start with fifth graders even and start having them really see what it's going to be like when they go to middle school. And is AI going to be allowed for whatever it is that they're completing? So when we look at these activities, it does have lessons that you can download for the different grade bands. But what the students are going to be doing by the end of this lesson is they're going to be coming up with their own student use of AI flowchart. And I thought this is a great way. It gives students accountability. It involves them in the process because so many times I feel like we're using AI as a gotcha, that student's using AI on their paper. How do I keep them from doing that? Well, have we involved them in that decision? Have we shown them how AI works? So sometimes we have to back up a little bit and say, well, let's involve them in that process. I threw these two things in here too, and you can click on the Neola one. So if you're uncertain of what Neola is, many of the boards and districts, school districts use this to help draft what their policies are. And so there's a very kind of, I call it generic, but because AI is going to constantly change, but there is some language that's in there on that last page that you can kind of start to use if you're thinking about updating your student acceptable use policy when they're using the internet. What does that look like when they're using AI now? A lot of school districts might still be using their original AUP, and basically it says, if they're copywriting or plagiarizing anything, then there's consequences for that. So you can decide what that may look like, but I definitely would suggest check with your district and see what's there, because that can help you when you're guiding your students and working with them to draft that AI policy. Any questions so far? Okay, all right. Throw them in the chat if you have anything, and otherwise I'd love to hear them when we wrap up at the end too. So again, what does this look like? This is a great tool you could use. So if you are a person like me and you're like, I don't have time to create this on my own. So if you click on this Canva presentation here, it will pop it out for you. And if you need to, you can always right click and open it up. But it will allow you to take one of these kind of draft templates and you can put it into nice digital print form if you want. If you want to go old school and use a big, large piece of paper and have kids help you write your AI kind of guardrails in the class, you could do it that way. It totally is whatever you think. But I really like this model of this red, yellow, and green, and then even blue. So when you're doing an activity with student, they could say, well, can I use AI on this today? No, today is a 0. Today's a red one. So your work must be completed entirely without AI assistance. Sometimes we might say, hey, we're just getting ideas for this project. We need to do some research. We need to find out more about it. So maybe it's a blue day. So today in our class, it's AI empowered. So the tools that we've talked about that are appropriate for us to use in class, students can actually interact with those and they can share with each other and use the AI on that. So I definitely like some of these different models that they have here. You'll see like a 0, 1, 2. This is an English example for 10th graders. You've got a high school environmental science class that has created one. So again, you can make it your own, however that may look in your classroom, but I would definitely say involve your kids in this process and put it together that way. After you've come up with that policy, right? And I don't even like calling it a policy. You've come up with those guardrails or those expectations, more or less. Then we work more again on how do we use AI together to analyze things, to work through our process of elimination, to help us come up with ideas, to help give us feedback. So again, there's some really awesome resources out there and ideas, but of course you have so many other great ideas as well. So here's just some ideas of how can we start modeling using the AI tool as a resource again, not as our thinking for us. So how about this one? Examine 2 versions of a text, one that was AI generated and one that was written by a human. So maybe me as the teacher, I have these 2 things ready to go for my student in digital format, whatever it may look like. And then they're going to compare the voice of each text, identifying which the human patterns are, or maybe they're actually going to grade each of them using our class rubric. So I want students to see, like, based on the results, is the AI paper even the best, or is the human one the best? And so then that opens up that discussion again in the classroom of, is AI always the best thing to use? I know even with my own 6th grader at home, they've started using Magic Student a little bit in their ELA class. And his response was, Mom, it's giving me wrong feedback. I did that in my paper that I was writing. And I looked back with them and I was like, you're right. So, then that opens up that conversation that, yeah, the AI isn't always right. And even us as teachers can't take that feedback it gives us all the time. We have to have that knowledge of that student, how they write, the things that they're doing, what their ways that they write are. So we have to always think about those as we work through. I threw some more examples in here. Again, this one came from AI for Education that talks about analyzing AI, but this Chat GPT one that I put over here was an interesting prompt that I really liked. And it gives you that prompt in that AI for Education resource. So again, if you're like, oh my gosh, that prompt is huge, this was really interesting. So the prompt, I just copied and pasted it. You're a writing teacher. I'm working with 12th grade English students on their critical thinking skills. So, and actually this relates to a conversation I had last week with an ELA teacher at the high school. Students were using the AI to write their paper. How is she going to know if they were the one doing it or not? Well, this is a really awesome tool to be able to use. It's going to walk the students through deciding what factual claims does a text make, how well does it address the topic or purpose. And then I copied and pasted a sample version of text in here. Now, if you wanted to actually use a student sample, just make sure you don't include any personal identified information in there. But you can copy and paste that in there. And then from there, it starts asking me questions about their writing. Well, here's the passage. For example, it states this in the passage. How might you verify whether this claim is accurate? So I really liked this prompt because it makes kids think about evaluating that writing and doesn't just give them all the information. So it's asking them questions. They have to think for themselves. They have to look back through the writing and decide, is it accurate? How do I know if it's accurate? So something like this, where we talk about analyzing our AI work or practicing together, I think can be really beneficial to everyone in the long run. And then when we go through that process, right, when we talk about being transparent, we look to see which ones are okay, what models are they using. This takes away this problem. Then this goes back to that conversation I had last week. They wanted to use an AI detector. And I said, oh no, I think, there's a lot of false positives out there. There's a lot of ed tech companies that want to tell you their product works, but let's focus on the green over here. Have conversations with students about appropriate use. Use their writing samples so you know what their writing looks like. Capture the reflections. So when we talk about that, last week we mentioned that in Perplexity and ChatGPT, students can actually share their conversation they're having with that AI chatbot. Have them share the link back with you so you can actually see the conversation. School AI allows kids to interact with a chatbot where you can see in real time. Magic Student allows students to interact with that chatbot you can see in real time. So we want to think and focus on these, have students share about how they use the AI in their resources, how are they collaborating with it, and not so much focusing on these, hey, I got you, now what? How are we preparing them for the future when we just say we're going to catch them, but we're not modeling for them how that may look in the real world? And then lastly, I wanted to leave you with some teaching resources. So these are just some of mine that I've started integrating. I know Betsy said she mentioned she's been working with teachers and starting to work with students. So if any of you have resources that you've used, that would be awesome if you're willing to share. But these are some lessons. This one was a 5th grade lesson where we just started talking about AI. These are high school resources that we were talking with students, all those things we were just discussing, how it works, how can we make a policy up, etc. And then, of course, there's some new tools out there that can help students through the process of learning and not just that copy and pasting and not learning anything about it. Khan Academy has an awesome new writing coach out there that I was playing with actually yesterday and thought it was really good because, again, it's asking the kids questioning skills. And then also you can see, I'm going to jump over here, maybe. Yep, there we go. So this is an example of what that Khan Academy would look like. So I'm giving them a persuasive essay. And then over here on the right, I could start to see the whole conversation that student was having in planning and writing their essay. So getting the ideas going, starting to determine what it is they want to put into it. So I have all those pieces that are there as an option. So check those out. Those are new things to try. And then I always relate back to this because we know that AI is growing in careers and in our workforce. So not allowing your students to start to use AI ethically and appropriately is like not allowing them to use the internet every day. And we know that that's not realistic. So think about those things and some of the tips and tools we gave you today to help get you started with having these conversations with either your staff or with your students. All right. Next week, our challenge. So last week, it sounds like some of you used those resources and took them right back. So before we meet next week, when we're going to be discussing student AI literacy, I want you to think about how can we shift from an AI policing mindset, like the I gotcha, now what do we do because they're using ChatGPT, to an AI enhanced teaching and learning mindset. So we gave you some things that you could start with today, but definitely I would love to hear any of your ideas that you have and any questions that you have as well. So I'm going to open it up real quick here to questions. I'm going to put up here the Padlet link that's going to host all of our resources. And what things are you wondering, or what things have you tried when it comes to AI transparency in the classroom? All right. I'm going to let you stew on that while you're eating your lunch, hopefully. But think about that for next week. And I always love a share out at the beginning. So, want to thank all of you for joining us today. All the resources will be in this presentation that you are more than welcome to take and use and share. Definitely do that. Reach out with any questions via my email or on X if you want to. And again, want to thank all of you for joining us today for our Lunch and Learn series, AI Appetizers. And we look forward to seeing you all next week. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Hope you all have a great week.